One of my favorite philosophers, Forrest Landry, a modern philosopher still alive today, has a system called the Immanent Metaphysics. In the Immanent Metaphysics, he looks at three primary attributes of reality: the immanent, the transcendent, and the omniscient, and applies these categories to all different manner and aspect of life. What I want to highlight today is relationships and how we look at relationships through the immanent metaphysics, because this actually creates a massive amount of confusion for spiritual entrepreneurs. One of the reasons that spiritual entrepreneurs have such a hard time in business is it's a very confusing landscape based on these three types of relationships. And if you are confused, it will paralyze you, especially someone like you who has very high ethics. Because if we feel like the way that we are relating to another person is unclear, or if we don't know if it's good, or we have not explicitly set up containers for how to experience each other, we will stop in our tracks and actually not do business, not do the actions that need to happen in regard for this other person. So the three types of relationships can be qualified as relationships of power, relationships of transaction, and relationships of care. My bet is that you got into your business to help other people based on relationships of care. You just genuinely love other people and you want to see them happy. You want to see them thrive. And most of the way that you participate in your business is actually loving and caring for people. Most healers, coaches, and people in the transformational space really, honestly, are just motivated by that care. But it's also very confusing in the transformational space, especially the coaching industry, because people have actually used care to manipulate and generate relationships of transaction. I sometimes say they have weaponized care. That's a form of manipulation so that they can create transaction. And it's also very challenging for spiritual entrepreneurs because they're typically so good at care and very challenged by how to set up dynamics and conversations that allow for healthy transaction. You can care for people all day long. And in that, you could do service work, you could do some sort of contribution, you could go work for impoverished people in third world countries and never have it be about transaction. And we would all still love and honor you for that. But if you want to build a business that has the capacity to grow and scale impact, transaction is going to need to occur at some point. Even all the nonprofits still do transaction. They raise money, they collect funds, they apply for grants. Transaction is an inherent feature of running an organization that can make a difference, no matter how it exists. There has to be money flowing through that organization. So knowing how you like to do transaction, and you get to learn that you will like to do transaction, understanding how that works means for most spiritual entrepreneurs that you actually identify two parts of your business. The part of you that is working in your business as the healer, as the coach, as the guide, as the mentor, as the motivational speaker, whatever it is that you do, that part is almost completely based on relationships of care and relationships of power. I'll get to that in a moment. The entrepreneur has to be focused on primarily relationships of power and relationships of transaction. And you can still be absolutely very caring when you conduct relationships of transaction. When you're in a sales conversation, that love and that care can still be on board. And what I often tell spiritual entrepreneurs is there's no way it's not going to be. You are going to have a really hard time, unless you have some sort of latent Machiavellian tendencies or narcissistic tendencies, you're going to have a very hard time not being caring. It's just so natural to who you are. And learning how to extend that care into transaction is so powerful. I know that a sales call with someone is going to be one of the most powerful conversations that we ever have, and potentially one of the most powerful conversations of their life. If someone's going to work with me and they're going to scale their business from $100,000 a year to $400,000, or from $1 million to $7 million, or whatever it is, that conversation and me demonstrating that you can both trust me with your vulnerability, and I can receive the benefit of your financial abundance, and you can turn that investment in yourself through me to even more financial abundance, is a game-changing realization. Because ultimately, yes, the money is coming from them to me, but they are investing in themselves. They are investing in their future through me. So I don't want to go into the dynamics of sales interactions, sales calls, all of that stuff here. That's not what this is for. What this is for is to help you have an awakened experience of these three types of relationships. To know that being loving can also be extended into receiving their investment in themselves through you. And now power. Power gets a bad rap. Power, and not for wrong reasons. Power we have typically seen talked about the most often when it has become problematic. The news and social media and all sorts of dynamics talks about power as toxic, because when it's used incorrectly, it hurts someone, and that's newsworthy. But the truth is that every interaction has some sort of gradient of power moving. If you're asking me a question, it's because you assume that in that narrow and confined domain of the information that you're asking about, I have more power than you do. And that's appropriate and right and good. That doesn't mean that I think that I'm better than you. Of course. It doesn't mean that I am in any way fundamentally more valuable than you. Of course. It means that there is a gradient of energy flow. Now, power, like I said, is going to be inherent in all interactive dynamics. If you abdicate your power, if you give your power away to avoid having toxic power, I believe you're actually doing a disservice to yourself and a disservice to those you are meant to serve. And inevitably, what ends up happening with people who try to abdicate their power is they become victims, and they find other ways to subconsciously take power. I don't want that for you. It's up to you if you want that for yourself. But the case is, and the truth is, that power doesn't have to be toxic. Power doesn't have to be a dirty word. Power doesn't have to be used to control and manipulate. In fact, power can be used to liberate. Power can be used to uplift. Power can be used to really guide someone on their path, on their journey, on their trajectory to who they must be next. Just like this discussion that you and I are having. So my invitation for you is to examine places that you've hidden in your relationships, especially in your business, because you've confused relationships of care, relationships of power, and relationships of transaction. You've not drawn clear rules and clear boundaries for how you interact with each of those things. You haven't done the work to really understand how to wield all three of those things in a way that generates win-win-win outcomes. Because if you're all care all the time, that's obviously not good. And the same if it's all power or all transaction all the time. None of these three things individually is the right answer. All three need to be cultivated, and you need to understand the roles that they're playing in your life, in your interpersonal relationships with your loved ones, and in your business. So I hope this has been illuminating and perhaps provoking, and I want to hear from you what you think. Where do you need an upgrade in your care? Where do you need an upgrade in your transaction? Where do you need an upgrade in your power? Is it happening inside of you? Does it need to happen with your clients? Does it need to happen with your marketing and the way that you interact with your business? How do you need to be showing up in the right way to bridge the gap between where you are and where your soul knows that you must be in the domain of these three types of relationship? Share it in the conversation, in the chat, in the discussion forum, and ask any questions. I'd love to respond and continue this conversation.